समदृष्टि में कृष्ण त्यागी हर स्त्री देने मात समदृष्टि में कृष्ण त्यागी हर स्त्री देने मात जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले पर धन डाले हाथ वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जय पीर पाई जाने माया व्यापे नहीं जेने दुर्वैराग्य जना मन मारे माया व्यापे नहीं जेने दुर्वैराग्य जना मन मारे राम नाम शुतारी आगी राम नाम शुतारी आगी सकल तीरथ वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए पीर पराई जाने कपट रहित छे कारू क्रोध निवार्या रे कपट रहित छे कारू क्रोध निवार्या रे बड़े नर संयुक्त दर्शन करता बड़े नर संयुक्त दर्शन करता बड़े को फिर आया कृष्ण जन को प्रेम कहिए जय पीर पराई जाने वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जय पीर पराई जाने परम दुखे उपकार करे तुए परम दुखे उपकार करे तुए मन अभिमान कृष्ण जन को प्रेम कहिए जय पीर पराई जाने वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जय
Namaskar, Salam Alaikum, and welcome to all of you. Gandhiji's philosophy of peace and non-violence has been an inspiration. Namaskar, Salam Alaikum, and welcome to all of you. Gandhiji's philosophy of peace and non-violence has been an inspiration to many all across the world. Though the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi are relevant across all times and ages, they have has been an inspiration to many all across the world. Though the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi are relevant across all times and ages, they have a particular significance in today's challenging circumstances of COVID 19. The Government of India has been organizing various events to commemorate the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. As part of the celebrations, the Embassy of India in Rabat, with the kind support of the government of the Kingdom of Morocco, organized during last year photo exhibitions, conferences, essay, quiz, and painting competitions on Gandhiji. The Government of India also organized a global rendition of Gandhi Bhajan Vaishnav Janto, in which Mr. Nasr Megri, a famous Moroccan singer, had participated. With the kind support and facilitation of the high offices of walis and mayors of Rabat and Casablanca, names of Rue Gandhi in Rabat and Boulevard Gandhi in Casablanca were corrected. Mission, with the support of the government of Morocco, paid a tribute to Gandhiji's life and teachings through a digital display on the walls of the historic site of Chella in Rabat. The display included visuals of quotes of Gandhiji, covering themes of peace, non-violence, ecological balance, and sustainable development. Other programs organized by the embassy included cooperation with Kap Spartal Film Festival for seminar on cinema and non-violence, inauguration of Gandhi Library at Ben Abdallah Group of Schools in Marrakesh, and Gandhi Jayanti celebrations organized at leading Asabil School in Rabat. In continuation of these programs, the live streaming of Gandhi Katha by Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, an acclaimed speaker on Mahatma Gandhi, is being organized by the Embassy of India. The Embassy is grateful to Dr. Radhakrishna for organizing this event on Embassy's social media platform. Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna is an acclaimed international speaker on the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi and has delivered lectures and talks on Gandhiji in various countries across the globe. My gratitude to Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna for very kindly accepting Embassy's invitation to deliver Gandhi Katha. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Gopal Krishna Pantji, Charge d'Affaires, Embassy of India, Rabat, for your kind message. Salam alaikum, namaskar, and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me and hosted by the Embassy of India in Rabat during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. Kasturba Gandhi's contribution, sacrifice, and suffering in making Mohan into the Mahatma and inspiring thousands of women to fight against injustice and racial discrimination in South Africa and in the Indian freedom struggle is extraordinary. I pay my humble obeisance to the Matru Shakti, to all the women who comprise 50% of the world's population. I express my deep gratitude to the Embassy of India in Rabat, in Morocco, for hosting Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, spirituality, his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence and Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Gandhiji, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Morocco and convey my warm wishes to the people of Morocco who have joined me online today. We stand in solidarity with you all in our common fight against the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic. I have come to know that there is a Rue Gandhi in Rabat, and Boulevard Gandhi in Casablanca, named after the Mahatma. During the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, a commemorative stamp has been issued, and Embassy of India has held many activities for promoting Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy during this period. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narrations. In today's Gandhi Katha, Srimati Swati Bhagat and Sri Deepak Kalra will be singing the hymns. The presentation and the technical support is being provided by Dr. Ravi Chopra. The Gandhi Katha hymns in Hindi. The lyrics have been written by late Sri Narayan Desai ji, my mentor, and I am very thankful to all of them. I have given talks and Gandhi Katha in 94 countries during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji in the past 2 years. Many in all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Gandhiji. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through non-violence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about the greatest man of the last century who has made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many world leaders such as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and all the other great luminaries. Today, in the field of international conflict resolution, people are interested in the effectiveness of peaceful means for ending disputes, as demonstrated by Gandhiji compared with the use of force or violence. In peace building context, scholars and practitioners are seeking to integrate authentic, indigenous, and local cultural methods of conflict analysis and intervention. People are finding inspiration in Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and his lifelong efforts of peace building and conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues and harmony. Throughout his life, Gandhiji was engaged in finding solutions to these problems. Gandhiji had deep respect for the world religion and developed lifelong friendship with people from different religions. He took time to study, reflect, and engage with different faiths and faith communities. During his lifetime, Gandhiji read the Holy Quran more than once, and it made a deep impression on him. And Mahatma Gandhi cultivated respect for Islam. To Gandhiji, the central teaching of the Quran remained that of peace. He regarded Islam as a religion of peace. He found Muslims to be brave, generous, and trusting. He sought to gain Muslim friendship through love. His ultimate remedy was to deal with the wrong, but not to hurt the wrongdoer. Thus, to him, the ultimate answer lay in the concept of live and let live, or mutual forbearance and toleration of his life. He said that this is the lesson he had learned from the Quran. Mahatma Gandhi used to start and end his day with prayers. In all his ashrams, every activity and program used to begin and end with prayers. from all the religions of the world. Gandhiji's unshakable faith in universal brotherhood is reflected in his fascination for the hymns from the Gita, from the Bible, and the Holy Quran that proclaimed the power of truth. In all the religious prayers in Gandhiji's ashram, Al Fatiha and Surah Al Ikhlas used to be recited daily in the morning and evening, and I have grown up reciting all this. Gandhiji said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural background from around the world. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life, till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, his revolutionary thoughts, actions, the lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all parts of the globe, at all times, and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. That faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards to find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. This he did by repeated questioning, and that question was Ko Aham, who am I, what am I, and what is the purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. The answer came to Gandhiji that the purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said, Truth is God. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of being truthful, of being good, and doing good to others. And the second understanding was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress towards an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. Gandhiji's endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. But because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, and respect to everyone. He respected individuals as individuals, and that is one of the main traits that we see in Gandhiji. William James Will Durant, the American writer, historian, and philosopher, best known for writing The Story of Civilization, spoke some of the most inspirational words ever about the Mahatma. He said, and I quote, "Not since Buddha has India so revered any man. Not since Saint Francis of Assisi has any life known to history been so marked by gentleness, disinterestedness, simplicity of soul, and forgiveness of enemies. We have the astonishing phenomenon of a revolution led by a saint." Now I'll play the Gandhi Katha hymn in Hindi, which elaborates upon Gandhiji's definition of truth as having harmony between thought, words, and deed.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान।
Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy was primarily truth centered. Truth was the first and foremost principle in Gandhian philosophy. Gandhiji's life was a continuous series of experiments with truth. He applied his philosophy to his own life through selfless service and to practical social and political service through his non-violent civil disobedience campaigns, which he termed as Satyagraha. And Satyagraha is his first gift to humanity. To understand Gandhiji's thought and philosophy, one must understand him as a whole and not in parts. His thoughts on religion, economy, his activism, his thoughts on education, health, society, politics, literature, and culture, and many more streams need to be studied, understood, and adapted according to the context. His life is filled with many kinds of challenges, solutions, and achievements. He used truth as an experiment not only in politics but in personal life too. For Gandhiji, truth is the relative truth of truthfulness in thought, word, and deed. And the absolute truth is the ultimate reality. The ultimate truth is God and morality, the moral law and code, its basis. Nonviolence, far from meaning mere peacefulness or the absence of overt violence, is understood by Gandhiji to denote active love. Gandhiji's nonviolence stems from two main points. First, if according to the divine reality, all life is one, then all violence committed towards another is violence towards oneself, towards the collective, whole self, and thus self destructive and counter to the universal law of life, which is love. Gandhiji believed that nonviolence is the most powerful force in existence. Had violence been superior to nonviolence, humankind would long ago have succeeded in destroying itself. The human race certainly could not have progressed as far as it has, even if universal justice remains far off the horizon. From both viewpoints, nonviolence or love is regarded as the highest law of humanity. Gandhiji realized that untruth, injustice, oppression, and tyranny last only as long as their victims accept them. The moment one learns to say no to untruth and injustice, their edifice collapses immediately. This was true for the political, the economic, and the social order. Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace and non-violence the world has seen after Gautama Buddha and Jesus Christ. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, oneness, truth force, love force, and soul force. Gandhiji had said, if we have no charity and no tolerance, we shall never settle our differences amicably and must therefore always submit to the arbitration of a third party. Many of today's conflict management techniques and resolution processes have a clear shadow of what and how Gandhiji had seen international issues in his times. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change. And he had said, I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our times. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non participating in anything you believe is evil. He had also said very famously, and I quote, generations to come will scarce believe that such a one like this, in flesh and blood, had ever walked on this earth. Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century whose life is a role model for all of us. But the effort has to begin from a point where you're standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy, and he was, of course, very busy, but what we mean is the action of putting ideas and beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines as economics, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, politics, and much more. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, modern industrialization, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these seven social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, my life is my message. Reginald Arthur Reynolds, the British writer, a Quaker, and an colonial activist, lived in Gandhiji's ashram in Sabarmati in Gujarat from 1929 to 1931. Reynolds was impressed by Gandhiji's vitality, his vision, honesty, tactical and strategic abilities, his charm, sense of humor, his logical and analytical mind, yet capable of real affection and the scorching passion for truth. I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun in Hindi about Gandhi's philosophy of truth, non-violence, purity of means that combine together in the form of satyagraha.
लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी लगन लागी लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन
Time magazine had listed out three most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or Salt Satyagraha. The third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. There is a common thread of non-violence in all the three. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat for Dandi, the seashore town, with 79 fellow marchers. Walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles a day, stopped at 48 villages, gave speeches morning and evening, covering 241 miles till he reached Dandi on 5th April. On 6th April, early morning, when he picked up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people picked up the salt, and as the campaign progressed, 3,100 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered the news, and that shook the world. So he remains the most powerful global brand ambassador of peace and non-violence, a youth icon for activism against injustice, apostle of peace and non-violence, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. In 1904, in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi completely transformed his life overnight and started leading a community life of self-control, simplicity, voluntary poverty, bread labor, and sarvodaya or welfare of all. He established 4 ashrams in his lifetime, 2 in South Africa called Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and 2 ashrams in India, Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat in 1917 and Sevagram Ashram in Wardha, Maharashtra in India in 1936. And in the Sevagram Ashram, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi, along with the ashram inmates, lived in poverty like the common villagers of India. The ashram life was his ideal of a non-violent, face-to-face society for the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs for uplifting the dignity and justice of the poorest of the poor. This is his second gift to humanity. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary satyagrahis, for offering the highest sacrifice in the freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor, to establish their self respect and justice, and get them ready to take part in the freedom struggle. I'm happy to inform you that I was born in his last Sevagram ashram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. Even after Gandhiji passed on in 1948, for more than 5 decades, my parents and all of us have continued to walk on the path that Gandhiji has shown to humanity. So, what I'm telling you is based on what my parents have told me, what my own understanding and experience has been with Gandhiji's thoughts and experiments. Mahatma Gandhi's life and thoughts are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society, and his constructive activities were integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his spinning, his silence, and his prayers were as much a part of his politics as of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the inmates of the ashram that he had founded. The ashram community, through their own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and practices, and continue to do so even till today, which points to the relevance of these practices. All these practices also gave Mahatma Gandhi the internal strength. Another thing that Mahatma Gandhi did in the ashram was that he carried on the experiments in health and wellness through nature cure, diet control, hydrotherapy, sun bath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day. So, our friend Horace Alexander, the British Quaker, spent a lot of time in Gandhiji's ashram, and he saw that in the ashram the bells used to ring 56 times. He said, and I quote, Gandhiji had wonderful courtesy and punctuality. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of watch. He had more to do in every 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learned how to pack the most into every minute. Yet he never gave the impression of being hurried and impatient. Gandhiji has given three gifts to humanity, and that is Satyagraha, constructive programs, and Ekadasha Vrata, or the 11 observances. 11 observances were the set of rules that Gandhiji had made for the ashram inmates to practice spirituality and progress in that path with voluntary self control. So, as I had said, ashrams were his ideals of non-violent face-to-face society for welfare of all, self-reliance, cleanliness and sanitation, and service to humanity for realizing his vision of village republic. Ivan Illich, Croatian Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram ashram in 1978, and he sat in the Bapu Kuti, or the cottage where Gandhiji used to stay, for a long time. And he said, and I quote, this heart of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness. Now I'll play the Gandhi Katha Dhun, which explains Gandhiji's philosophy of truth is God.
आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल।
Gandhiji's role and contribution to the political arena are well known. What is less known is his contribution towards health and well being. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed on the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was much better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was also a firm believer in nature cure and conducted experiments related to diet and fasting. He always believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove that very cause rather than falling ill again and again and then attempting to treat it with excessive medication. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Gandhiji's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. Gandhiji's message was simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, reduce the want, follow the tradition, the cultural practices and the values, follow the environmental credo and nature cure for living in harmony with nature. There is a very nice Vedic expression from the ancient civilization of India which says, as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the universal body, so is the cosmic body. As is the universal mind, so is the cosmic mind. Yoga and meditation integrates all components of health. And Gandhiji was a strong believer in Ayurveda, in Ashtanga Yoga and nature cure as well. His experiments with nature cure were always on himself, and he had started experimenting from his student days. He had also advised his friends and disciples to follow these remedies and treated and cured 30,000 patients through nature cure. Gandhiji was the first environmentalist much before the entire world was preoccupied by ecological crisis and environmental degradation. And with his stunning premonition and knowledge, he had declared the earth has enough for man's needs but not for man's greed. Greed will be the main reason for the environmental degradation and the ecological crisis he had predicted almost a century ago. Further, Gandhiji had said, and I quote, "The earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us." Last year on 2nd October, United Nations released the stamp brought out by the UN Postal Department with that quote. Very few people also know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi, his wife, contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergencies and service of the very, very sick and service of humanity. During the Second Anglo-Boer War in South Africa from 1899 to 1902, and in the Zulu uprising of 1906, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi established the Natal Indian Ambulance Corps along with 300 free Indians and 800 Indian indentured labor. And during the war, they carried as stretcher bearers the grievously wounded and injured prisoners of war. In the bubonic plague outbreak in Johannesburg in 1904, he and Kasturba Gandhi not only rushed immediately to help the Indian indentured labor, but quarantined the patients in an empty godown after sanitizing it and thoroughly cleaning it, and treated them through nature cure. So they were immediately available as frontline workers in all the emergencies. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi returned to India in 1915, and after knowing India for the entire 1 year, in 1917 he established in Ahmedabad the Sabarmati Ashram. But in 1918 there was the Spanish influenza pandemic, the most deadliest of the pandemics, and Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as the quarantine center, treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity, and maintained physical distancing. Gandhi ji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, gave them correct information for maintaining physical distancing, for being positive. They prayed with them, meditated with them, and made them understand the need to take care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. Gandhiji had said on 10th November 1918, "Our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self restraint and of imposing a limit on our acts, wants, and desires." In 1906 or about that time, Gandhiji had published several articles in his newspaper, Indian Opinion, by the name of The Diet, A Guide to Diet, which was later on brought out as a booklet, but it became very popular. And later on in 1942, Gandhiji wrote the next book called Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors and vaidyas from day to day. And he wrote in the preface that this book was translated in many Indian languages. An English translation also appeared, and that reached the West. And then it was translated in many languages. So that book became the most popular of his writings. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crisis globally. First is the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, which is causing immense physical stress, sickness, death, fear of death, and existential crisis. The second is the serious and long drawn financial crisis, which is also causing physical and mental anguish. And the third is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Mahatma Gandhi, who had said, "My life is my message." And his life was so transparent and open. So there is so much to learn from him. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family. We may be living anywhere in the world, we may be of any color, creed, or following any religion, but we are all brothers and sisters. Whether we choose to see it or not, we live on the same planet, the planet Earth, and we have only one home, this Mother Earth. The current COVID 19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. We will have to learn to live with COVID 19 now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Mahatma Gandhi to make the necessary changes in thoughts, actions, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. Many lessons are very clear, and some are still unknown, surrounding us in uncertainty. This uncertainty is causing mental stress, anxiety, existential crisis, fear of extinction and death, and the mass psychology of living in depression and grief is pointing out towards this fact in the current pandemic. We are collectively grieving for the loss of our known lifestyle. Our ancient sages and seers from India had always looked upon all the men and women as Vishwamanava, as global citizens, and said that world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And this is what we need to understand always, that we are all in it together. But if we still return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing after money, power, position, wealth, lifelong consumerism, then COVID 19 has given us the wake up call. This kind of lifestyle of empty consumerism and mass distractions has only increased the difference between the rich and the poor, created the huge carbon footprint, increased the misery of the invisible poor masses. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation, prayer, and chanting of whatever mantra you want or whatever name you want to take relieves the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain and when you feel a loss of control over the situation. And when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up, the thinking mind reacts to all these conditions. It always has, even in normal times, but a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very, very capable of lowering the immune system of our body and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces relaxation, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, and remaining positive. Gandhiji comes out as the greatest healer and the wellness guru who comes free of cost during and after the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in the times of COVID-19 pandemic. Gandhiji's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, empowerment for self-care and care for others in the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Embassy of India for hosting Gandhi Katha. My special thanks are to all of you who have joined me online and have given me the most precious gift, the gift of your time. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light. I will end with the Gandhi Katha Dhun Shubha Mangal Ho. May there be auspicious good. May there be good. May the earth be auspicious. May the sky be auspicious. May every particle on earth be auspicious.